Hey, what's up, motion designers? This is Gio from Family Business, and today we're gonna talk about caustics. So we're gonna learn how to generate caustics, how to color caustics using dispersion and add the chromatic aberration effect. We're gonna learn how to denoise renders, getting rid of those nasty fireflies. We're gonna address some of the issues, and we're going to take a look how we can use render passes and composite everything in After Effects. So let's get started. Before we start, I want to note that rendering caustics takes a lot of time sometimes, and second of all, forgive my creepy English. So I have prepared a scene for you, plane in the sphere and a regular camera, and if we need caustics, let's fire up the IPR live viewer. So any light can generate caustics: area light, daylight, HDR. HDR is very hard to art direct. It's very hard to tweak light sources. So usually I don't use HDR to generate caustics. I mean, I use HDRs, but I use area lights and other lights to play with caustics. So I will create the HDR environment to make everything dark, to see better what's going on, and I am going to create regular area light. So let's add the target tag and put the sphere in the target object and move it aside, and we have light in the scene. So let's create the specular material. I will add it to our sphere. And how to generate caustics? Well, it's kind of there already. All we need to do is to switch from direct lighting to path tracing or PMC. I will switch to path tracing. We will talk about PMC later. Let's switch to path tracing, and voila, we have caustics. Magic. So let's render and see what we have. Switch to Octane render. Let's dial down our max samples to, let's say, 1000, and GI clamp, let's leave it where it is. So 20 seconds, a lot of noise, nothing special. Let's see what else can we do with caustics. So if I will open up my specular material and play with the transmission color, for example, let's color it red, our caustics will change color. Obvious, right? If I will change my transmission to blue, I will have blue caustics. And we have an interesting parameter to play with. It's called dispersion. And if I up this number, my specular material becomes like prism. I think this is called chromatic aberration, right? And if I take a closer look, my caustics will get the color from this chromatic aberration: yellows, blues. Let's dial the power down, let's say to 50, so we don't have everything burning around. Say 25, and now it's more obvious, right? Let's render. So 22 seconds, nothing special, and we have kind of colorful caustics. So things that affect caustics. First of all, let me show you one scene that I have prepared for you. Let's go to my caustics tutorial folder and take a look at some examples. I have a regular platonic object, almost everything same that we just made, but I want you to take a look at this part, and then let's compare it to this part. See? Burning. Let's import these two guys into After Effects and see. Sorry. Okay. So take a look at this and this, and everything is same in these two renders, except this one has beveled edges. So the shape of your object, physical shape of your object, is going to dictate a lot about caustics. See this detailed highlights right there, see? And without beveled edges, everything is just washed out. So it happens because these beveled edges, this round corners, they act like magnifying glasses, and they shoot rays in this direction, and they burn hot. So let's continue. So if I convert my sphere to an adaptable poly and squish it in, let's see, I changed the shape of the shape of my caustics. So I get this refractive caustics, and if I zoom in on the other side, interesting thing is that I get reflective caustics as well. So caustics is not just light passing through transparent object. Caustics is light reflecting from objects as well. So that's why we need path tracing or PMC when rendering caustics. We need global illumination. So let's continue on, and let's compare. Let's talk about denoising our results. Let's start with the dispersion one, and let's hit render. So 23 seconds, nothing special. Let's compare it to without dispersion. So let's hit render. Again, very little time, and let's compare this to. So with dispersion, without dispersion, without. As you can see, dispersion gives us much more noise and much more fireflies than without dispersion. Also, if we take a look at the shape of our caustics, we can clearly see that with dispersion we don't get as detailed caustics as we would get from the regular clear white transparent material. So in my opinion, it happens because of those heavy colors, those dark blues, dark purples, pinks, blues, purples. They don't burn that hot, and so, for example, right here we have a purple pigment, and purple cannot be as bright as white, so we lose detail in this side. But whites burn hot, yellows, they can burn hot. Well, that's why we have much detailed caustic renders with clear transparent materials. So let's try to denoise and talk denoising things. I will add dispersion again. So let's talk path tracing and PMC. Now, in my opinion, PMC works much better, but it doesn't it's very hard to denoise with just PMC. You need to add AI denoiser. But problem with PMC is that it doesn't work with AI denoiser. you can wait for days to complete render, but it won't. Even on 1,000 samples or 500 samples, it doesn't end. It never ends. So that's why I don't use PMC and I use path tracing. Of course, if we want to get rid of the noise and fireflies, the obvious thing is to up the max samples to, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000. Oops, one more zero. Okay, it will not work. Let's see render. So 1 minute and 8 seconds. It looks relatively clean, but still you get a lot of noise in Caustics. Everything looks good around though. So next thing, when we need to denoise our Caustics, is GI clump, and GI clump is gonna have a massive impact on the noise reduction. So by default it's about million or something like that. If we dial this down to, let's say, 1, we will get much cleaner render, but we lose the brightness in our Caustics. So we need to kind of compromise, and in my experience, something like 25 preserves a lot of Caustics, and it's a little bit manageable to denoise. So let's start from 25 and go down and down and down. So let's try 20. Still Caustics persist. Let's try 10. We're there. Let's try 5. We're there. Oh, we start to lose the brightness in our Caustics. Maybe this is the look what you're looking for. So I don't know. So 5 is gonna be much cleaner than 10, than 25, than million. So let's try to render this. So render has finished, and let's compare the two. So this is default GI clamp at 3K samples, and this is GI clamp at 5 and 3K samples. And as you can see, we lose a lot of detail with the low GI clamp. And in this case it's okay, but whenever we work with the real thing and we need some fill light, for example, let's add a fill light. So let's add the HDR. So in real life you would need a lot more light, and with a lot more light you won't be able to see as much Caustics with GI clamp at 5. So let's see what else can we do. So let's add a AI denoiser. So I will put my GI clamp up again. So let's try 15, and everything is cool. It burns hot. Of course, the shape of your light source, the direction of your light will have a massive impact too. So let's play with the shape. So if I make my light source narrow, it changes the way things look. The distance of my light source is gonna play a huge role as well. So as you can see, we don't have any highlights right here, but we still have Caustics. You can always add noise to your light texture. Let's see. Noise will have a lot of impact on the way Caustics look. So let's add a noise texture to our light. Let's change it to stupul. I'm not sure if I pronounce it right. Stupul. Let's type in 600 and let's give it some contrast. As you can see, we break our light source to black and white chunks, and blacks don't shine of course. 600, let's go 1500. And as you can see, the shape of our caustics changed. So I can give it some animation speed so it floats, and if I render the animation, my caustics will have like ripply effect and it's gonna look super beautiful. So let's continue on with denoising things. So also it is always a good idea to duplicate the light source, because duplicating light source gives you some cool possibilities with caustics. See? Everything looks much cool. So let's talk denoiser first. So I will get rid of my second light. I will clear everything in my HDR. Whoops. Let's fire it up again. HDR doesn't seem to be working right now. Let's delete the HDR for a second. The IPR froze, I think. Oh, I have the second HDR. I'm so sorry. Let's clear this HDR. We have everything black again. I will pop this here, get rid of the texture, clear texture, and let's talk denoiser. So in order for denoiser to work, we need to assign the Octane camera tag to our camera. We need to enable camera imager, and we need to enable spectral AI denoiser. Let's enable it. Let's leave everything as it is at default settings, and also we need to enable in our Octane render settings, use denoised beauty pass, and we need to go to render passes and save beauty. That's it. Now AI denoiser is not a magic pill, so if we have like let's say 500 samples and hit render, we will get a terrible result. So it will look blurry and crappy. So let's take a look. Let's see, we have the ugly Photoshop blur look, so Gaussian blur look. And let's take our samples to, let's say 4K, and with 4K samples your AI denoiser is gonna have a lot more information to play with, and the denoiser will work much better. It will preserve much more detail. So let's hit render and wait. So render has finished. 1 minute and 39 seconds. Nothing special, but keep in mind that I render at 720p right now, and if I up to like full HD, the time is gonna double or triple or even more. So absolutely clean. Yes, it works. Denoiser does magic, but with high amounts of samples. So GI clump at 15, and let's take a look at some different things that that can change the way our caustics look, that affect our caustics. So next thing is gonna be, let's fire it up again, the index of refraction. So if I dial this number down to 1, everything is gonna get wider and everything is gonna spread out more. So if I up this to, let's say 2, everything is gonna get narrower, right? So as I remember, if I remember it right, diamond has the index of refraction of 2.4, and yes. And here I want to talk about one issue with specular material and caustics and all that jazz. As you can see, we have very blown out reflections of our light, speculars. And one of my friends on Instagram had this issue, and I want to address this now and how to get rid of this. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to duplicate my light source slightly forward or in the same position. It doesn't really matter. So this one, let's say this one is gonna be responsible for our specular, and I'm gonna disable my diffuse. And the other one is gonna be responsible for diffuse, and I'm gonna disable the specular. So we lost all the specular because this light is blocking reflection of the specular light. So I'm gonna go to my visibility, visibility in the Octane tag. So camera visibility, it doesn't work. Let's say general visibility. And yes, now we can play with this light's brightness to dial down the intensity in our reflections. So I'm gonna go to light settings, and let's type in 3 or maybe 1. And as you can see, we have a lot more control over how bright our reflections are. So we need more caustics. Now, if we need more caustics, we should either up the GI clamp to, let's say, 50, but it doesn't work. As you already know, GI clamp at 50, at 100, at 200 is going to produce a lot more noise, and we're going to need a lot more samples to denoise everything. Other way would be to up the power of my light. So let's say 150. Yes, our caustics shine brighter, burn hotter, but we get this blown out hotness all around. So I find the better way of lighting when I need to render my caustics, and this better way is called IES light. And let me show you this. So I will get rid of my Octane lights. I will go to my object lights and Octane IES light. And what IES light does, let me assign to a target tag, and let's add our sphere as a target. Let's move it aside. If I click the render button, nothing will happen. So let's take a look at our IES light. IES light is basically same as Octane light, area light, but it has an image texture in the distribution tab. So if I go inside, I can load there a special file called IES file. It should be .ies, and what this file does, this file store information about light distribution. So JPEG files won't work. You need .ies file. So IES file. This one seems to look good. So X arrows. I will load this in. And as you can see, even at brightness at 100, the IES light doesn't burn hot at all, but we can still see our caustics. So let me dial this down. Let me move my light source a little bit back. And let's play with the GI clamp. Let's see. let's change the sphere. Let's play with platonic right now. Let's pull this up. We have a platonic object. Let's convert it to an editable poly. Select all the edges, and like we said, let's add bevel to it. Let's type in subdivisions, 5 subdivisions, and offsets of 2 centimeters. Add our specular material. And we have caustics. So I can rotate my platonic. And as you can see, with a lot less light, we get a lot more caustics. So if I up this value to, let's say, like 60, I will play with my light source position, even the size. If I dial the size down, I will have much sharper caustics, much sharper shadows. Everything's gonna be much sharper. So let's say 300 in brightness, 1500 in brightness. So look at the caustics. They are super hot. As you can see, we get a lot of reflective caustics. And the cool thing is that I can go very low on GI clamp to something like, let's say, 10, and I will not lose the detail in my caustics. Let's up this scale of my light source. Let's dial this down to 100 again. And yes, I have my index of refraction will change a lot. So 1.5 is the index of refraction of the glass, somewhere there. And let's take a look. Oh, look at this, the blown highlights. I like this a lot. So why IS file is good is because we preserve a lot of information in our caustics without blowing out all the scene, the rest of the scene. So we could add the fill light, we could add HDR, and everything will work just fine. With fill lights, right now we're working with one light source, and even with one light source, let's take a look at our last render. We have clean results, and with fill light we will need a lot less samples to get clean results because usually noisy renders are caused by dark and high contrast scenes. With fill lights and HDRs and blah 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 blah, you will need much less samples to produce clean renders. So I will add my HDR as a fill light. So let's I will add it here. Let's go to my tutorial files and add our Studio HDR. I will dial down the intensity to like 0.3. I will duplicate my light source. Maybe push it back somewhere. Maybe same direction or almost same direction. Okay. I will add color to my ground. Object, materials, diffuse material. Let's say we want red or lighter, something lighter. And let's talk render passes. So we are using AI denoiser, and let's save this tutorials. Let's call this test. I will name this test. And let's go to my Octane render settings, enable render passes. Let's go to PNG. And usually we do what? We check our beauty passes, right? Our reflections, refractions, diffuse direct, indirect, blah, blah, blah. Since we're using denoiser, we should save denoised layer passes, render passes. I mean, we need denoised reflection direct. We need denoised diffuse indirect. Diffuse indirect is the most important pass. It is the global illumination pass, and by doubling or tripling this diffuse indirect, we double our caustics, double our brightness. Also, it's always a good idea to export our shadows, and shadows don't really need denoising because shadows usually they're not that noisy, because we know that our noise is produced by global illumination, and that's it. So I will export one more pass, and this is going to be our refraction. Let me refraction. I will check this on, and I will also export go to my info passes, and I will check the material ID. So let's up the samples on info passes to like 3K. Let's give this info passes name. Let's call it test, and I for info. Let's save. Let's hit render and wait. So the render has finished, 2 minutes and 39 seconds, and look at this. Absolutely no noise, no grain. Look at this detail. Look at those highlights shooting because of our round edges. And we have saved our compositing files, so let's take a look at them. I will import all of those files. Let's go to tutorials, test, and I will choose all of them, import, and drop those guys in one composition. Okay, so the first one is going to be our main pass, and I will put this down. Our material ID, I will put this even lower. And so what we have denoised diffuse indirect. This is going to be our global illumination. Denoised reflections. We're gonna have this weird pass that we get, and I will delete this. We have our refractions and our shadows. So first of all, let me shut all the reflections and refractions and diffuse indirect and take a look at our shadows. So why do I need shadows? I need shadows to put under my caustics, so I can isolate caustics much more. So let's put this on multiply mode, and now we have darker shadows. So bright caustics are gonna look tasty on dark shadows. So I need to dial the opacity down to like 50 or maybe 30. The problem with this is that I don't need shadows on my glass object. So this why material ID comes in handy, and I'm gonna type in linear color key in my effects and presets. I will apply this effect to my material ID layer. I will choose the glass object, and voila, it's transparent. And I will choose my shadows and put it on alpha matte. So right now we have our shadows only on the ground. So let's continue on. Let's add our refractions and put this on screen, and as you can see, we brightened up our object. So let's take our global illumination, turn this on and put it on screen mode, and look at this, how tasty those caustics look on darker shadows. And we can always add our reflections if we want. This one has almost zero effect because we don't have much reflections going on. And that's it. You can always come on and double the caustics if you want, or up the shadow, which is not good, but you can do it. And let's take a look at some example scenes. So I will open my Caustics file. Let's fire it up. We have the mega scan of the crab. We have two IES lights. Let me show you. Let me go out from the camera. So this one is bad. One IES file, second IES file, and they produce caustics. And then I have one area light with one area light. I'm sorry, where is that light? Oh, here it is. So one area light that has diffuse disabled, and this one acts as a reflector, just a reflector to highlight the rim of my crab and some diamond objects. So in this scene, what I've done is I've added my gradient to the transmission color with very light colors. So with gradient you get with gradient in transmission you get this beautiful transition play between colors, and these colors are these colors impact our caustic colors. Important thing to note is that let me bring my picture viewer back on. So the problem with the dispersion, as you can see, with dispersion you may get this high contrast artifacts. Of course denoiser takes care of those guys, but sometimes you do not want those artifacts to show, and you can always come in and add a little bit of roughness to our glass material. With one to two clicks up is going to be more than enough to soften those artifacts. So again, I have my render passes checked on: shadow, refraction, denoised reflection, denoised diffuse indirect, reflection indirect, blah blah blah, and also one of the most important passes, material ID, to isolate my shadows only on the ground. So if I render everything, I will get something like this. And like we said, we have our beauty pass down below, and then we have our shadows masked only to the floor. Then we have our diffuse indirect reflections and all that jazz like we talked, and a little bit of color grading with contrast and color balance and all that jazz. And don't forget to play with the ground color, because ground color is something that that is very important, because with dark colored grounds you get much lower intensity caustics, but also kinda sharper caustics. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you all learned something new today. So let's run over everything. Caustics can be generated with any light, even with HDRs, but it's much comfortable to use regular lights like area lights, daylights, and IES lights to art direct our caustics. Every light works just fine, but in my opinion, IES lights produce give you much more flexibility in terms of overall brightness of the scene, overall brightness of the of our caustics, and also IES lights produce much cleaner looking results. With area lights you get much more fireflies and grain with IES lights. So denoiser is a friend, but denoiser doesn't like PMC. So if you like to use PMC, do not use denoiser. This is never gonna render. And don't forget to use render passes, because render passes give you a lot of flexibility when in post. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something new, and we'll see you next time. Bye.